Hello, welcome back to the Learning on File podcast. My name is Mark Taylor. This is part of the Education on File podcast network sponsored by the National Association for Primary Education. This week we've got a slightly different format and a slightly different episode. I'm going to be chatting to Janet Allison, and she's from Boys Alive, and we're going to have what I think is a really interesting discussion about how boys learn, how boys fit into our education environment, and some of the things that we can do to be aware of all these things to really help us moving forward. So as a parent, thinking about how we interact with our boys and also girls for that matter, and also as teachers, how that really impacts on maybe how we set up our classroom and how we think about our education. And also if you are a child listening, thinking about how it feels when you're in that environment and actually some of the things which you might recognise, like wanting to be moving around more and doing education in a slightly different way. So I hope you enjoy this. And this is my interview with Janet Allison. There comes a time in every person's life when you realise it's not about doing what you are told, but doing what you know is right for you. Let us take a journey of learning and discovery with the world's most successful people who are living the life of their dreams, walking through life using their inner wisdom and being of service to others. Forget exams, grades and test scores. What is your purpose? As we let go of what we think should be and learn from our elders to gain knowledge, inspiration and a true sense of who we are. What are your dreams? Does your life have meaning? Are you living a life of significance? Let's talk with today's guest. Hello, my name is Mark Taylor. Welcome as we spend some more time together on the Learning on File podcast. Today I'm talking to Janet Allison. Hi Janet, thanks for joining me and let's explore the journey of who you are.
Hi Mark, I am so happy to be here speaking to you from Portland, Oregon. And my journey really began when I was a teacher. And I had my university degree and I started this first grade class and I had a classroom full of boys. And I did not feel prepared. I did not know what to do with their energy and their enthusiasm. And I very quickly had to get very curious about how boys learn, how boys communicate, how boys think, and felt a little bit dismayed that I had not had any training in my university in my 4 years of my degree program, because this became the primary focus of my education as a teacher. And I started to learn about brain differences and communication styles and really began to adapt my approach towards boys and girls too. And it really set me on this path to become an advocate for boys. I've been working in this field for over 20 years. And you know, if you look at any of the statistics, boys are struggling here in America, and I know for a fact in Australia and the UK as well, our boys are being expelled from preschool. They're being sent to the principal's office more than girls. And this is very concerning because I believe that there is absolutely nothing wrong with our boys. It has to do with our expectations. Most of the early teachers that boys have are female. And so, of course, we're expecting boys to relate to us and behave from our female perspective, and it doesn't work that way, Mark. And you're a teacher, you've obviously, and you're a man, so you've observed this with a little different lens. So I'm really curious to hear about your experience and have those contrasted here.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting for me is, and you're absolutely right, I have the experience of teaching drums in a boys' school. I also teach drums in a girls' school, and when there are two girls and a boy, our children living at home, and they're all very different individually. But I'm really keen as well to understand exactly what you were saying in terms of if you have a starting point of understanding that just they're different because of their gender, then it gives you a better understanding of where you're even going to start to approach it, isn't it? Rather than just having to do it one-on-one as these things come at you.
Absolutely. And I totally want to make it clear that every single person on the planet is different, and males and females both have these qualities that are hardwired. And when we can recognize those, and so one of them would be boys tend to be more active than girls. They need to move their bodies more. They're wiggly. It's harder to sit still. And yet that's a natural behavior for them. Yet our school system isn't set up to accommodate that. So the model of school is often sit still, listen, and learn. And that is absolutely not the way many, many boys are designed to learn. And I love that you're teaching drumming because that's just perfect for many boys.
Yeah, they absolutely love it, and it's interesting you were saying about the environment of learning. I mean, it's something I'm very aware of, sort of spending time in schools. But yesterday, I was at a lecture, the Christian Schiller lecture, which is part of the National Association for Primary Education over here, and this particular lecture was about reading for pleasure, and there was sort of an understanding that, there's the reading for pleasure time and it's in school and we're going to sit behind our desks and we're going to do it on our own. And we were just sort of talking about, how ridiculous that is. And then they showed some examples of there was one child decided actually they'd like to sit on the floor, and then they suddenly made sort of like a beanbag corner, and then another group of children wanted to have a blanket, but they didn't want to be on the blanket. They wanted to put the blanket over the table so they could create a kind of a den. And then some of the boys wanted to be outside, and so the next slide that came up was a boy literally hanging off of a tree but reading for pleasure, and it's just that having that freedom, having that understanding that what is it we're trying to do here. We're trying to help them learn, we're trying to give them the kind of environment so that they can succeed in life. And actually that was it. It was just do it in a different way, not just sat behind a table, having that freedom, having that flexibility, but the net result is that they were engaged and wanting to be part of what was going on.
I love hearing that. That is so perfect, that we can open up our view a little bit and be okay. And those boys, that boy hanging in the tree was absolutely in his full-on learning mode. If he had to be sitting behind a desk, his brain would not even be operating. So for most males, their brains, your brain, Mark, is functioning, is aware and awake when your body is in motion. And that's why boys like to move their bodies while they're wiggly in school. It's helping their brains work. It's why you'll get more conversation from a boy if you do something with him. So you go for a walk, or you go out and play ball, or you're even washing dishes together. But just that movement helps him find his words and attach his words to his feelings. And you'll get more conversation from him if he's able to move his body at the same time.
I mean, that's a really interesting concept, isn't it? I mean, I'm certainly aware of the not looking directly and sitting across the table scenario of that kind of,
Right.
the best conversations. I mean, this doesn't involve moving specifically, but certainly in the car, facing forward, looking out of a window, so you're not got eyeball to eyeball. You've got a little bit more freedom, but the actually doing something as well. I mean, certainly, like you say, playing tennis or doing something where you're just kind of just out and about and moving around. That makes a lot of sense, and I'm not sure I've actually heard it sort of articulated in quite that strong before.
Yes, it's really important because the brain is he's able to think if he can move his body. So that's just primary. And I love that you brought up eye contact too, because that's a place where we value eye contact. I don't know, every parent I've ever asked has said those words, look at me when I'm talking to you. And that will send a boy into fight, flight, or freeze. He will not hear a word you're saying, because usually we're saying that when he's feeling emotional or he might be in trouble about something, and it's perceived as a threat. It's not that comfortable. And so when we can adjust our expectation as the adult that, oh, it's okay if he's not looking at me right now. I know he's hearing me. And I've had grown men tell me, I had one dad tell me, I tell my wife if she wants me to look at her, I can't hear what she's saying. If she wants me to hear what she's saying, I can't look at her. So I tell her to choose one channel.
Wow. That's amazing. And I think the thing which really suddenly fills me with a lot of faith and a lot of inspiration is the fact that when you understand that you can set the environment to begin with, then you've got rid of half the battles that you're starting with in a normal classroom, aren't you? Because actually you're setting yourself up to fail, as it were, if you expect it to be this way or that way. Whereas when you understand that if you've got a classroom that's flowing, which they've got some freedom and they can move around in, those initial maybe 5 or 10 battles you might have to begin with a child, you won't even encounter, because they're already feeling they're not being threatened. They have the flexibility, they have the understanding that they've got a little bit of control, which I think is a lot of the time that, isn't it? There is that kind of, I'm the young buck wanting to be in control of what's going on, and actually having a little bit of that kind of, yes, this is me and this is how I'm going to live my life, and actually to get rid of that from the outset must be a great advantage.
Well, and everybody wants to be understood. Everyone wants to be seen for who they are. And I think the biggest challenge comes with the teacher, and especially the female teachers, of being able to look within and look at their own expectations and bias around boys and the activity level of boys, and that, kind of in your face response of boys sometimes, and to bring in some strategies where he does feel seen and heard by you. Boys are really relational learners. They will do anything for a teacher that they feel like gets them. So if you as the teacher or the parent take that extra little bit of time to, check in on the football score from the weekend or something that is his passion, then you are strengthening that relationship with him, and he will be much more open to trusting you and learning from you, being open to learning from you.
I think this is great, and I think for the parents and children listening, it's hopefully we've already created just a conversation or a thought pattern or a kind of a little light bulb moment of kind of, we're in a completely different world than we were just 15 minutes ago before I'd actually started hearing this. And that's what I love about these podcasts, is just that ability just to go, right, that's completely somewhere I've not been before, but now I start to understand, because as you're explaining it, you can see the penny dropping, certainly in my eyes as well, just that kind of, yes, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes. And another piece that is really important to understand about most male brains is that there is fewer places to process words. So boys don't tend to love a lot of processing out loud. They don't tend to love hearing mom explain all the details of everything that's going to happen that day. Boys tend to just tell me the one thing that I need to know right now. And women, on the other hand, love to talk. And we love to process out loud. And I myself have been accused of asking 5 questions in a row without stopping. And also asking, and women pay attention, because what many women do is we'll ask a boy or a man a question. Tell me if this has happened to you, Mark, that we'll ask a question and we don't get the answer that we want. So we'll ask it in a slightly different way, and we'll keep asking. This drives boys and men crazy. If boy says, I don't know, be okay with that. Let it rest. Don't keep coming back to him, asking again and again. Give him some space. And he may come back to it later. We have to realize that for women, we process out loud a lot, come to our answers out loud. Many boys and men process inwardly, and it takes time to find the answer. But it's harder for them to find the answer inwardly and quiet when we're outside talking and talking and talking.
That does make a lot of sense, and I can also hear and see lots of scenarios where that's the case. But I have a question for you. In as much as I get that as in principle, and if life was such that you have loads of time to process these things, then it would all work out for itself. But a typical example being first thing in the morning, we're all off to work, we're off to school, we've got lots of things going on, and there are certain things that just need to be in place in order for life to work a few hours ahead, which is like you said, it's almost the worst thing in the world for a boy in that scenario, because they're being badgered, they're under pressure, they're having to do things now when it's actually about later. But in that scenario, sometimes those things are really important. So how do you sort of get over that sort of divide, in as much as you do need a result, or you do need an answer, or you do need some sort of end game, as it were, but actually not actually have them sort of up against the wall in that kind of emotional way, or that kind of word way, which you're saying doesn't really work for them?
Sure. So what you can do, and it's up to us to adjust as the adults. So it's saying the essence of what you need to say. So jacket, appointment at 11, whatever it might be that needs to happen. Also recognizing that boys tend to be more visual than auditory. So write a list, have the checklist there in the morning. Maybe you've got, for the young ones, you've got a picture of the 3 things that have to happen before they go out the door. Or you write a note, hand it to the boy, schedule of the day, whatever it might be. So, and every kid is different, so you have to adjust. But when you have some things that you know are pretty typical, you can start there. You can try there. And recognizing the places where you do butt heads, those are the places to stop and go, oh, am I talking too much right now? Am I asking too many questions? And also really important to plan ahead, give him a heads up. If you have to have a conversation with him that might be a little emotional or challenging, prepare him ahead of time. Let him have some time to think. Don't just spring it on him. So it might be, after dinner, I'd love to talk with you about X. And so you have given him a chance, a little heads up, a preview of what's coming.
I really like that, and just that idea. I can sort of see the strands coming out. The idea of writing a list, a note, which means that it can be processed at another point in time. You then don't have this, I need to know now. You need to be engaging in the conversation now, because all the information is there. It's on a letter, it's on a note, it's on a, like you say, just a list of things that you need to be aware of, and it then becomes relevant as and when it does. And like you said, being the grown up and actually understanding it in that bigger picture world is really key. And I guess wanting that to be the case is the starting point for us as parents, or us as teachers, is knowing that we can make a difference by our experience and our understanding of that.
Definitely. And, the place we want to land in everything is, how do we strengthen our relationship with our boy? And if it means I'm going to make myself sit and write a bullet point list, that's going to help me stay connected with him instead of yelling or nagging. I'm going to adjust myself as the adult and try that behavior and see if it changes the situation.
Yeah, it's great, and I like the fact that it's a process and it's a journey as well. Like you say, you might try this way and it doesn't quite work, but then you can try another way. But actually, you're a million miles away from where you were when you, like you say, you were butting heads, because you're just thinking about the whole thing in a different way. And I love that. It all sort of starts to feel much more free flowing and much more control, which of course is the thing. It feels like it's a lot less of, but actually you've got that understanding of what you're trying to achieve to help that relationship and to help everyone who's in that class or the home or whichever it happens to be.
Yes. And the thing that many boys will tell me, middle school, high school, is that they don't feel listened to. So that's a place where we can stop as the adults and really, really listen to our boys. We get so busy in our lives, and it may be slower for them to find their words. So we try to hurry them up. And it's so much about carving out time in your busy life that your son knows that he can come to you and you are going to be fully present with him. And it could be as simple as, if you're picking him up in the car after school, that you have the radio off and that it's just quiet. And it's kind of also just your inward gesture of just being completely open and heart filled there with him, and that you build that into your relationship from early on. He's going to make it hard. He will test you and challenge you on, are you really going to listen to me? Are you really going to be available? Because that's what many boys do. But to be that reliable anchor for your son is so important. And it could be as a teacher too. You could be the teacher that is available, half an hour before school starts, and that one boy just manages to come into your classroom, and he might not even say much on a particular day, but that he knows that you're there and you're willing to listen without trying to fix what's going on, without telling him what to do or having judgment about what he's talking about, that you can just really be that neutral anchor that feels secure for him is so crucial.
And what happens when things get a little bit past that? I mean, I suspect being in this particular frame of mind and working like this probably eliminates a lot of the stresses and strain further down the line. But if you're still dealing with a situation where there is anger maybe between the boy and the teacher or the parent, or that they've crossed a boundary which really isn't okay, where do you go from there? You then need to be firmer? Do you have an initial boundary which is not okay, but then you create the environment that we've been talking about to allow that to start to dispel and to disperse? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I think that, number one, we can say, I messed up. I, said too much or I yelled too much, that we take responsibility for our behavior and we're modeling for them how to do that. And I had a dad tell me that he really lost it with his teenage daughter one day. And it was so hard for him to go back to her and say, I overreacted and I apologize. I want to try it again. Will you let me have a redo? And that we teach our kids that, none of us are perfect. We're going to say things that we regret, as are they. So how will they learn to make that right, to repair that rupture in the relationship, is our modeling of doing that with them. And I also like what Brene Brown says. She said, try this. Try saying, the story I'm telling myself about why you're behaving this way or why you're not getting your work done or whatever the situation might be, this is the story I'm telling myself. Where am I getting it wrong? So you've opened that door for your child to say, well, you're not listening to me, whatever it might be, but that you're there willing to ask, where am I getting it wrong? I'm trying to figure this out too. Help me. And together, let's figure it out. Let's collaborate. And so he knows you're with him, regardless of what his behavior has been.
Yeah, I love that. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Are you a teacher looking for support to create and develop music in your school? We have created Primary Music on Fire, taking the fear out of teaching by giving you the step-by-step skills and ongoing support you need. If you're a homeschooling parent and would like the opportunity to learn an instrument with your child on our 5-day challenges, all of this is available through Primary Music on Fire. Go to educationonfire.com/primary-music and sign up to the newsletter. That's educationonfire.com/primary-music. we talked about you being a teacher and actually getting involved in this. So, which teachers do you remember from your sort of school days, and what was it about them that really sticks out? And I guess bringing it round to the sorts of things that we're talking about, can you sort of relate to some of your experiences to your experience now having been a teacher and from where you're now sort of putting your energies?
Yeah. When you have an experience as a child that is so opposite of what you think it should be, you tend to, I think that is Mrs. Kingsley is why I became a teacher. And I was very much a active tomboy girl when I was in primary school, fourth grade. And we were out playing kickball one day. And we were kids. It was the olden days. We used to just yell at each other and figure out the rules and who's doing what, and it was quite active. And I came back in after recess, and my teacher called me up to the front of the room, and in front of the entire class, she proceeded to tell me how bossy I was. And I think my interest in language, I didn't know it then, but I think looking back on that, my interest in the words we choose and how the words affect the people around us is huge. And so it took me a long time to be able to translate bossy into leader. I mean, we're talking like 30 years. I carried this belief that I'm bossy, which, that doesn't feel good, and tended to make me kind of step back from places where I could be a leader. And so I hear that whole piece, then I hear from parents who get, that a call from the teacher or a note home saying your son is so aggressive, or he's acting out or misbehaving or disrespectful, all these words that we use. And it is studies have shown that the words used to describe boy behavior are more critical and more negative than the words used to describe girl behavior. We have to pay attention to this. What beliefs are we instilling in our children when we aren't careful with the language that we are using with them?
Yeah, I think that makes it makes an awful lot of sense, and I think that's it. And I think for all of us, I mean, I think it's a running theme for everything that we've been saying so far is the fact that it's being mindful about what you do and what you say. It's about being very aware of everything, because it's those, they seem small things, but actually they're massive things and really, really important things. And if you can be super sensitive to exactly how you come across and how you present yourself and how you deal with everybody, that's the starting point for everything, I think.
Yes. And that's that place where we have to take a look at ourselves and our own bias about, am I a female teacher who likes a quiet classroom? Okay, I am that teacher. Now, what about my kids who need more activity, more noise? Am I okay if they're not sitting in their chair? Am I okay if they're up walking around the back of the classroom? And being able to stretch ourselves and build our circle a little bit wider so that we can have every child feel like they are in a place that is suited to them. I have to tell you, I had a mom tell me her 7-year-old, so in 7-year-olds here in America are in first grade. He came home one day and he said, "Mom, all the girls are perfect and I'm the bad one." At age 7. Yeah. Yeah. So boys are so perceptive. They get it. They get it early on that the girls tend not to be disciplined the same way as the boys. The girls can be noisier than the boys. I mean, it is for us to look at our own approach to each child, boy and girl, and all the gender nonconforming children in between.
Yeah, and there is that sense. It's certainly one of the things that I find sort of working in sort of two sort of different gender schools. You know, you have the one side of like you say, wanting to sort of be strong and actually stamping your mark on things, and then you also have the kind of just wanting to please, just over everything, just kind of, you know, wanting to it all to be okay. And it is an interesting distinction, that, and like you say, within that you have every part of the spectrum as well. But as a general thing, certainly I think from the girls' point of view, very often it's that sort of wanting to be good, wanting to please, wanting it all to be okay. And it's interesting, like I say, starting from that understanding and that being a different environment from a boys' school. It's a really interesting dynamic, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And recognizing that in a co-ed school, you know, everything that we do for our boys helps our girls too. If we allow more activity, more competition, that's all going to help our girls as well, because they're going to face competition in their lives as well. So they might not necessarily choose that, but when it's offered and it's presented as this is part of the program, then they're also learning how to stretch their boundaries as well.
And I guess also their understanding of how the opposite sex works and shows up in the world. Like you were talking before about the husband talking to his wife about, if you do this, then I can hear or I can't hear, and actually, you know, like say in that co-ed situation, it's that kind of, well, I can see the boys needed more of this, or they reacted like this, or when we had an environment which was looking like X, it worked in a certain way, and when it was looking like Y, it was something very different. And for them to be aware, either consciously or subconsciously, about how that works, then that's got to be a very positive thing for their well-being as they grow up as well.
Absolutely. And you know, Mark, it's all about how do we understand each other better so that we can connect and be in strong relationships together. That just moves humanity forward.
So having spent a lot of time in school, having actually sort of really sort of developed the understanding of dealing with children, both boys and girls, what advice would you give your younger self now, if you were, with all the knowledge and that you have, in terms of if you were sort of growing up through school, or you were becoming an adolescent, and with the understanding that you have, what advice would you sort of give your younger self now that you think would help, both in terms of your emotional development, but also your understanding of others?
You know, one of the things I would give myself is to say, relax and be more playful. Don't take everything so seriously. I think that is one of the gifts that boys give us, is that everything doesn't have to be serious. So play a lot more.
I really like that, because I think it certainly, as I get older, it's still something I really struggle with, but it's something I'm more aware of, that you sort of go around the same sorts of cycles, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, that's not quite such a big deal that I always had it in my head that it was, and actually you sort of relax into things, and you're more playful with things, and you don't take them quite as seriously. And I think to sort of understand it, but maybe also to give yourself permission that that's okay. And like I say, it may be that naturally as a boy you don't mind as much, but I mean certainly when I was younger I probably would have minded even back then. And I think to sort of understand that actually it just is what it is, and just allow it to be, and tomorrow's another day, and I think that's got to be a very positive thing, if you can find a way to make yourself feel that's the case.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, but I think for parents too, you know, just relax and be silly with your kids for the evening, and the laundry will wait and the dishes will wait, and keeping that relational piece strong is primary. I mean, that is what's going to hold them steady in their life, knowing that they can come back to you always. And you know, I mean, it's clear when you get to the end of your life, what's important. It's the relationships.
That's very true, and I think I really like that as a concept. It's not something I've spoken about very much on any of the podcasts, but I did some volunteering work in a hospice, and the really interesting thing about about being in that environment is, one is it's one of the most happy places I've ever been, which is the opposite that most people think. But just, the amount of things that you learn, and the actual gift of being around people who are really at one with themselves. And of course that's not everybody in that scenario, but some of the people that you speak to and who are in that particular environment coming to the end of their life, they really have wisdom which is beyond anything. And what it does is it just sort of shows that mirror of that kind of, what is important. If this was my last day at whatever age, whether I'm in my 40s, whether I'm in my 20s, whether we're at school, and you don't want to get too sort of focused on it, but if this was my last day, what would I like to be doing, and how would I like to be feeling, and how would I like to be showing up, and who would I like to be around? And I think when you can have an essence of, actually, that's the person I want to be, and like you say, you get rid of all the worry of the rest of it, because if it was my last day, then who cares about the rest of it, because I'm just going to go for it. And actually, if you can do that just because that's how you want to be, then every day is going to be fantastic for you.
And, we have the practical realities of life, but it is a gift that dying people are able to show us, that all of that other fades away. And what is important is looking into the eyes of your child, looking into the eyes of your parent. That's what's, that's the soul connection. And that is what we, in our busy material everyday lives, that, we have to do all the practical things. But when we can really recognize that's the essence, that's why we probably wanted to become parents in the first place, was to have that deep, loving connection. And everyone deserves to have that from their parents and from their teachers, I believe, as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's having that almost bird's eye view of and it, like I say, it is an environment, it's an experience, sharing experience that we have on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And I think if we can understand and feel that, and like you say, have those connections with all the children that are in our life, then that really is, like I say, it's the blessing that we know that it is. Because when you can show up in the world like that, then you gain everything and give everything that you want in that sort of truly authentic way, which is the most wonderful thing. Yes,
well said.
So just as we start to round up, we've talked a lot about how we can actually emotionally and understanding sort of support everyone in our world. But have you got a resource that you would like to share, which you think has made a really big impact on your life? And what was it about that resource that's done it?
Well, I'll tell you what, I started about a year and a half ago co-hosting a podcast. And that has been, I think as podcast hosts, Mark, we get a lot out of, maybe more than our guests, but as the hosts, we really, it's so much fun to be a part of these conversations. And we've been able to interview some amazing authors and parents. And I just want to share that podcast called On Boys, Real Talk about Parenting, Teaching, and Reaching Tomorrow's Men, because, I'm just merely a catalyst in that treasure, because there is so much wisdom there, and such a variety of topics. Everyone can find topics that are applicable to their lives and to their children. And so I would just encourage your listeners to check out that podcast. It's anywhere where podcasts are found, and you can include the link in your show notes also.
Absolutely, we'll make sure we've got all that there so people can click straight through. And as well as the podcast as well, what sort of things have you got on the website which can support parents and children from there as well?
Well, I'd love to offer it's an audio download, and it is about boys and anger. Anger is a big emotion for boys. It can be very scary for parents and teachers. And when we can understand, much like what we've talked about today, when you can understand the underpinnings, where is the anger coming from? How do I help him navigate this big emotion? And so I'd love to offer that audio download for your listeners. They can find it at boysalive.com/anger.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Janet, for sharing your wisdom and allowing us to learn from your wonderful experiences.
Happy to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I just wanted to remind you that we have some free downloadable English and literacy resources that have been given to us very kindly by teachingpacks.co.uk. If you go to our website, educationonfile.com, and in the top menu click on blog, you will see each week I've been putting a free resource for you to download and explore to help you in your classroom. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to chatting to you soon. Thanks for listening to the Learning on File podcast. For more information, please visit educationonfile.com and follow the links from the homepage. This show is sponsored by the National Association for Primary Education. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.